So, oh, there we go. Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending which time zone you're in.
Fastamai from the Isle of Man, or Moramai if it's good morning.
So, I'm here with Chief Minister Howard Quayle in the inner sanctum of government, that is the Cabinet Office. And thank you for your time today in sharing your thoughts and some answers, hopefully, with the North American Manx. As we were saying a little earlier, I know your father as a Methodist minister and a member of the Londu Choir. Of course, your sister has just taken over as conductor of the Londu Choir. Right. I don't know a lot about the Chief Minister as a man, so perhaps you can tell us something of your time before you were elected to the House of Keys, and perhaps why you became a politician.
Right. Well, first and foremost, I have to say I don't consider myself to be a politician, David. I'm just a Manxman who's stood to do a couple of terms if I was wanted, to help take the island forward, and then I was going to slip out. So if people want to know about me personally, I suppose my parents were farmers from Kirkmichael, top of Bagaro, and they didn't want me to go farming. So I was, they sold up and I was packed off to boarding school to get a good education so I wouldn't be a farmer. So I started my career in the Treasury. I then moved in to work for an insurance company as a junior partner. But I think farming is a madness in the blood. And I gave up a well-paid junior partner's job to sell everything I had to buy my first farm in 1991, which is a famous farm, Ballabitchel. And that's the home of the Kellys. Kelly from the Isle of Man is Bitchel Kelly, and that's their original home. So I then, I've worked at Clerical Medical, which is another specialist insurance company.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Clerical Medical.
But in 2008, the Isle of Man lost a lot of its income with a VAT renegotiation with the United Kingdom. It lost over 20% of its income, coupled with a financial crash in 2008. And I felt that we needed people who had a little bit of business understanding to stand to get the economy balanced, who weren't bothered about being popular, who obviously, if I lost my seat, my pride would have been hurt, but I was worried. I'm big into intergenerational fairness, David. I think it's really important that we look after our children and our grandchildren and make sure that we don't pass the debt, put it in a tin and kick it down the road to our children, that we deal with the unpopular decisions now rather than later. And that's why I went into politics, was to get the economy balanced, sort out public sector pension debt to give our kids a future.
Right. Balancing the books was something that Emma kindly mentioned. I mean, do you have a qualification as an accountant or a technician, or?
No, I suppose the qualification I have, I've always said you shouldn't go. I did know an A-level accounting at Manx School and law and stuff. I've got all my basic O-levels and things. But the most important thing anyone can have is that pain of sitting on the stairs of your house thinking, how on earth are you going to keep your business going? How are you going to build it up? Yeah. I run my property rental business, my tourist accommodation business, a couple of farms where we had our pedigree Aberdeen Angus herd, which still has a British record for the highest priced red Angus sold in Europe. But I've sat on the stairs thinking, how on earth do I, pay the bills, keep the business going when you're self-made? And I think until you've had that pain, what have you got to offer in politics? So that's what I thought I had as a self-made businessman. I thought I had that as a sort of a skill to help get the books balanced for our economy. And just before COVID, we had the books balanced again with a modest surplus, and then along came COVID, and but there we are.
So, as we were saying a little bit earlier, I mean, particularly in a small community, many people think they know much better than the government how to do things. But I think for the most important thing in our lifetime on the island and the lifetime of people throughout the world, that the Isle of Man government got most things right in relation to COVID. Can you tell us how you see the sort of island's response to the pandemic, please, Chief Minister?
Well, I suppose it was a community response that I was very proud to be part of. We had, obviously, COVID came along in March of last year, and we shut the island down pretty quick. I had to take a really unpopular decision to even stop some of our locals coming back until we knew what the situation was on the island.
Yeah.
And then we asked people to quarantine. And when they came back initially, they were in hotels. And then when they came out of quarantine, they could go home. And we were able to relax a little bit more. But effectively, we shut the island down for a while. And as a result of that, we got shut of COVID from the island by the 3rd of June of 2020. And for over 6 months, nearly 7 months, the island had a total free life. We were a little bit like Brigadoon, for those of you that know the musical. But we allowed key workers over, medics over, emergency people that we would need over. And businesses were able to get on with their lives. People could go out, shop, go to, if you like a drink, go down the pub, go to see a local show, go to chapel. And that was, I suppose we took it for granted. We had another outbreak, sadly, in January. Someone hadn't followed the rules properly, and we shut down again. We kicked out COVID, but effectively we bought time until the vaccine was developed, and then by March, April, we were in a position where we started to open up again, because by now I think we've got nearly 70,000 first jabs and nearly 60,000 second jabs. So 90+% of all our people that are eligible have had the first dose, and by August we'll have had everyone. By the end of August, who wants a jab will have had their 2 jabs.
And I think you've described that as world-leading statistics, certainly in terms of percentages. Lots of things in the UK were described as world-leading, but perhaps weren't.
Well, I think at one stage, in the early days, the Isle of Man was in the top 10 in the world per capita for testing of people and tracing. Then we were one of the, I think we were top 3 in the world for the first jabs of the vaccination. So I suppose you just got to get on with it. Whatever our 3 legs motto is, whatever way you throw me, I will stand. And there was no manual for the Council of Ministers and myself to take off the shelf and say, well, today is the 24th day of the pandemic, we're going to do this today. We just had to make decisions. And if you bear in mind, the Isle of Man didn't make its own oxygen. Everyone was going on about ventilators, but it was oxygen, the little tubes you have in the nose. That's what was the most important defense breathing difficulties for people. We built our own oxygen plant and a shed over it. We had to convert a ward that was slightly to the side of the hospital in case we had a massive overflow of people with COVID. And we had to get PPE, and everyone remembers the problems of getting PPE, but the Isle of Man has a lot of manufacturing businesses on the Isle of Man who have tentacles all over the world. And we were able, through those contacts, to source our own PPE. And not one of our nurses or doctors or ambulance drivers died or got ill as a result of lack of PPE, and that's something I am personally very proud of.
I think we had 6 months of old normal in the second half of 2020, which I think was quite difficult for organisations to have a UK parent. For them to do the UK parent to take on board. Well, the Isle of Man, everybody says it's different, which obviously it is, and unique. It was difficult for the likes of the company that you worked for way back, and many others who have a UK parent. They try to impose their will on the Isle of Man subsidiary. I mean, the response to the pandemic, do you think that the success that you've had could see an upturn in the tourist industry?
Well, it certainly put the Isle of Man on the map, because when we opened up in June of last year, we were the first place in the British Isles, if not Europe, to open up internally, where there was no restrictions on the Isle of Man. And as a result, I was doing interviews with GMTV, Sky, Michael Portillo's Classic FM radio station. There was the New York Times, Germany, Poland. The Isle of Man was getting mentioned all over the world in the media. And I think that will help with a little bit of tourism to, where we are a small island, obviously in the middle of the Irish Sea, but it gave us a phenomenal amount of publicity.
Yeah, excellent. And a question I had in from Delaware, is tourism critical to the Isle of Man economy?
Well, it's probably only about 2% of our GDP. So yes, it's important. It put money in the pocket of locals. The TT races, for example, there's an awful lot of local people open up their house to bikers, and that'll pay the rates bill for the year. So, I mean, the Isle of Man is a stunning place. If you've never been to the island, but you've got your Manx roots, I would urge you to come over. Our national anthem is "O land of our birth, O gem of God's earth." And as far as I'm concerned, the Isle of Man is a gem of God's earth. Stunning, beautiful countryside, history, historic buildings, the only entire jurisdiction on our land and sea to have UNESCO biosphere status. And I think it's it is a special place.
So aside from COVID, tell us about the successes of your administration, Chief Minister.
Well, sometimes I think I'm like a Jonah, because normally a Chief Minister will have one major problem in their 5-year term. I think I'm on 7 or 8. I've had money value, EU Code of Conduct, tax-free, beneficial ownership, Brexit, and then COVID, just to name a few problems. And we've come through it all okay. So the economy was balanced with a modest surplus. We tackled public sector pension debt, which might not sound very sexy, but if you've got a liability of in the billions and you just stick your head in the sand because it's not popular. If I say to people who vote, I'm going to have to, as a civil servant, you're going to have to pay more to get a reduced pension, you're not going to be exactly very popular. But we tackled it. We explained to people that you're better off paying more and getting something, rather than living in a fantasy world where you retire and maybe a year or two into your pension, it suddenly collapses like happened in Ireland. So we managed to work with the public. And as a result, going forward, it's sustainable. We still have liabilities, but it's much fairer for our young people going forward. They're not going to be crippled with a lot of debt because we haven't put it off now. We've tackled it now. It should have been dealt with 20 years ago, but it wasn't a sexy topic. It wasn't a vote winner. And most politicians, if it's going to damage their career, they're going to gloss over that. So we've tackled it. Might not have been popular, but we've got on top of it. And yes, COVID came along and sadly blew our economy out of the water, but we're recovering. Just before COVID, we had just under 400 people unemployed. And I'm delighted to say that now we're down to just over 400 people unemployed. And that includes all your long-term unemployed people or people that maybe can't work through no fault of their own. So that's about 1% of our economically active people.
There's always going to be a few, aren't there, who are on that list.
Absolutely. Sadly, there's some people who think it's an art form of not having to work and get benefits, but they're in a very, very small minority on the island.
We can chat about that off camera. So, what would you say was your best or proudest moment as being Chief Minister?
Well, I suppose there's two, and naturally, as Chief Minister, leading or coming off the hill and having a standing ovation and a round of applause in Wolfers from the public there, that happened to me last year and this year. It's never happened before, and that was something personally for me. But I think my all-time most proudest, humbling moment had to be laying a wreath at the Cenotaph. It was so moving that I was the first Manxman or the person from the Isle of Man to lay a wreath. The Isle of Man had, sadly, the worst casualty rate in the British Isles in World War I. Unemployment was high. Our people thought, well, we'll get 3 square meals a day and a salary. It'll be over by Christmas. And we're mown down. My great uncle behind me here was sadly killed in June of 1918. So to lay a wreath, that was special.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you. And we talked a little bit before we came on camera about, mental health issues. I mean, that's come to the top of the agenda everywhere. That's something that you feel strongly about, I think.
It is. It's strange because when I came into politics, I thought I'd be focusing on finance. That was my sort of. I'm self-made, and I thought that's where my skills would be. But I was asked to be Minister for Health, and I merged two departments together back in 2014. And it became apparent. I went round our mental health facility at the time, which was an old folks' home that had been adapted, and it took me all my self-control not to cry. And I made a promise to myself that I would do something about it. And I fought tooth and nail in the Council of Ministers to get support from my colleagues to go to Timmel to build a purpose-built mental health facility where the building helped people recover, as well as dealing with their in a more humane way with their issue and looking after them better. And we've developed the first mental health strategy the island has ever had too in 2015-16. And I had the honour as Chief Minister. One of the first things I did was open it. And that it's going to help people going forward. It's a modern facility that we can be absolutely proud of. We researched it well, and it will, mental health, I think, across the world is going to be a problem. COVID has caused lots and lots of issues. We're seeing increases in suicides and mental health issues, and it's scars that we're not aware of yet. So we've been able to put an extra £1 million, which to some of your listeners might not sound a lot, or viewers, but for the island to put an extra £1 million in when we've had all the cuts with COVID and getting the economy balanced, to employ more staff to help with our mental health issues on the island. And 1 in 3 of us will have a mental health issue. And before it was swept under the carpet, you just didn't talk about it. But that's it's a health issue, and we should just treat people normally. If they've had a breakdown, well, one of us, there's 3 of us in the room now as we're sitting. One of us will have a mental health issue in our life, and we'll get better if we provide a good service and get on with it.
I mean, it's a ironic thing to say, but the COVID, because of the associated mental health issues, has brought it further up the agenda in every jurisdiction, I think.
It has, and people are talking about it more, which
isn't a solution, but it is good.
People are, as I say, in my day as a child, if someone had mental health issues, you avoided them like the plague. You didn't go anywhere near them. It's like a taboo topic, and now we can talk freely about it and realise that all of us will have an issue at some stage, and it should be part of mainstream health, and that's what we're doing on the island. So we started off from a bad place. I'm not saying we're anyway perfect at the moment, but we've moved on rapidly in the last few years.
Well, whatever job you're in, you do the best you can to make things.
Health is like a super tanker. You put change. I know when I took over as health minister, we were only training something daft like eight nurses.
And
I got it up to 20 now. You can only train nurses based on the number of hospital beds you've got from a safety point of view. But we now have 20 nurses and 8 mental health nurses coming off the production line every year. Now it's going to take several years to help reduce the average age of our nurses down with these new ones coming online, but we can train our own on the island, which is a fantastic facility, and our young people have got a great opportunity. They don't have to go off, they don't have to pay for the grants. We fund all that, and that will help, but it takes a while to turn it around.
As long as the super tanker isn't in the Suez Canal.
Yes, or not rocks nearby.
So Mr. Doug Quayle, who is the treasurer of the Old Manx Society, sends his greetings to you.
Thank you very much.
Is he one of a number of connections that you have in the United States? Are you aware of any family over there?
Well, I've got the Cashins from Kirkmichael, who my great auntie married into. They have family in Colorado. Let's go back to the first. But really, if you go back a few, my family have lived on the island for a few hundred years. I think we were MacPhails originally in the 1500s, and then the Mick got dropped for obvious reasons when the English ruled, and then phonetics failed, became Quayle. But we're everywhere. So if you're listening to this in America or Canada, or wherever, you're my cousin, far removed. But my great grandfather went out to Canada to maybe move the family there see if he liked it, to settle down. It didn't work for him, and he came back. So he was a Christian. Sorry, he was a Moor. Sorry, his wife was a Christian. And if it hadn't been for that, I might not have been here. So how your life takes it. But Quayle is a good Manx name. And,
absolutely.
Hello to everyone with the good Manx name of Quayle or Fail. It's all related.
Yeah. So if your cousins or any of the NAMA members want to come to the Isle of Man now, tell us a little bit about what the rules are currently.
Well, we've just changed it. It was 2+2. If you've got close family on the island, then you can come. No, without any restrictions, other than if you've got the vaccinations, you don't need to quarantine. If you haven't been vaccinated and you're a family member, then you will have to have a test when you arrive, and then 6 days later have another test. But if you're wanting to come on holiday, just at this moment in time, we've restricted it. We've called it 2+2, which on the Isle of Man in the UK, you get 2 vaccinations spaced apart, and then you've got 2 weeks of letting it work to build up the efficacy in your body. Now, we've just altered the legislation because places like Ireland, who use the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the Jensen vaccine, it's a one jab, they're working on as giving you the protection that you need. So we've widened it now so that as long as you've got a World Health Organization approved vaccination, then you can come to the island and not have to quarantine. Obviously, if you're showing COVID symptoms, we'd ask you not to travel, etc. And we hope that by the end of August, September, October, we will be totally open again. But at this moment in time, we're just doing the final second jabs for our population, and we're just wanting to give as much protection as we reasonably can. We can't stay locked down forever. We had to open. We've all got to live with COVID. It's not going to go away. And if you keep shut down, you're going to bankrupt your economy. The strain you'll put on people's mental health and businesses, etc., is too much. And we're seeing in the UK more people dying now because COVID has cancelled operations and cancer treatment, and people dying from COVID. So we've got to learn to live with it. But people are nervous, and I get that. I'm nervous myself as a politician, making significant changes going forward. But we've got to learn to be sensible and live with it and make assessments for ourselves. If we go somewhere that's crowded, do you wear a mask, for example? Do you wash your hands the minute you get home? Do you not hug someone if you're in a crowded room?
Yeah, I mean, you've been very much your policy, which has increased in acceptance this year, that your phrase is, we'll be out of your lives.
And, trying to get out of people's lives. My Methodist forefathers will be proud of me because in one day I shut every pub and nightclub on the island. So looking back, they'll be probably giving me big cheers when I did that. But joking apart, we had to do that in the early days. But now we've tried to step out of people's lives, and we've explained, and we're putting out messaging that you have to take responsibility for yourself, where we've just brought in 140,000 lateral flow tests that people can get to check themselves to see if they've got it. And we're just asking people to be sensible and think about others. Yeah,
well, I think that's, as you say, you've got to live with it, and you've got to make your own decisions and be responsible for them.
But if I can say, Dave, one of the things that's been humbling about this is what the great Manx public did to look after their neighbours. We had people calling around doing the shopping for elderly, people that may be having to isolate, leaving on the doorstep for them. The rugby club in the north of the island in Ramsey, where we're going around delivering food and helping anyone who couldn't get out. There was people on low incomes cooking spare food and then delivering it to neighbours who they knew were elderly and struggling. Little kids painting stones with the NHS logo, selling the stones to raise money for the Manx Solidarity Fund. There was kindness on every corner, and if there's one good thing that came out of COVID is that I've been worried about the Manx community spirit. Maybe it wasn't as good as it had been, but by God, it came to the fore.
Well, I hope. Well, those things happen in times of crises, really, don't they? So a bit of a lighter thing. Some of our viewers, listeners, whatever, are familiar with Sun Below the Yardarm or Sundowners. Tell us about Howard O'Clock.
Howard O'Clock, that was a bizarre thing. But it turned out every day at 4 o'clock, I gave a briefing to the people of the island where I would make a speech saying what was going on, etc., and then I would answer questions from the media. And people saw it as sort of reassurance. We tried to be we were totally straight with people. We told them how it was. We tried to explain things because there's so many false rumors. They say, you know, truth. A lie is halfway around the island before truth gets its boots on. And the media were then trying to attack you, etc. And the public watched it in their tens of thousands. And it became, because we did it 7 days a week for quite a while, just when we were in the thick of this, people were having a drink. It was their time for the whole family to sit down and watch. And one of the media outlets, Jeff the Mongoose, it was called at the time, coined the phrase.
We had one of these sessions with Jeff, so some of them are familiar with Jeff.
They coined the phrase Howard o'clock, and it just became a Manx way of life. And bizarrely, they had a cartoon of me, and they asked could they do some merchandising. So they put it on mugs and T-shirts and bikinis of all things. And it sold out. In fact, I have my own wine label because the wines, I think the wine seller asked could they do it on some wine. It sold out 3 times, but it raised a lot of money for the Manx Solidarity Fund to help people who are maybe struggling. And one of the good things that came out of it is that whenever I go out, young people know who I am. A little toddler came up pointing, there's Howard o'clock. So I treated it as a bit of fun, but equally it was important because I think for the first time in a long, long time, the public have been able to connect with us. We've been able to get our messaging out to the public, which is really hard when you're just doing interviews with media and they then interpret it themselves what the story is.
Yeah, well, we're not going into that. But yeah, we did have a session with Jeff, the Mongoose, and they condensed the facts and they put a little bit of Manx humour into it as well, which is good. Yeah. So I didn't realise that you'd been in financial services. I had a career in financial services, and although I'd see myself as pro-European, I think there's some evidence that perhaps Brexit has presented opportunity for the island in the financial services industry. Would you agree with that?
Well, there are. I mean, I was very worried about it, but we didn't get a vote on the Isle of Man.
Absolutely
we
not.
were never a member.
No.
Protocol 3 gave us the freedoms of movement of people, freedom of agriculture, fisheries, and manufactured goods to be traded around the European Union. But I had to deal with what the hand I was dealt with, and I had to make sure that whenever the UK negotiated, the Isle of Man had customs union with the UK, so our goods could move freely between ourselves and the United Kingdom, and that we had the freedom of movement of our agriculture and fisheries and manufactured goods into Europe without any tariff. So we've negotiated all of that, but I'm working with the World Trade Organization, because the Isle of Man was a member of that in its own right through the UK. But through the UK, so Japan, Australia, New Zealand, free trade agreements, we've got freedom of movement of our agriculture, fisheries and manufactured goods. But I'm trying to get services, financial services, and that's what I'm working on at the moment. And to the day I leave this job, it's like going through treacle at this moment in time, or a big muddy field. But the foundations will be done. So the next Chief Minister will hopefully be announcing at the end of this year, early next year, that we've got services included, and that should enable opportunity then for Manx businesses on the Isle of Man to go further afield, which they were previously unable to do.
I mean, how do you see the island's economy developing, you know, other than financial services, which was underpinned it for quite a while?
Yeah, well, I mean, the life assurance sector is massive on the Isle of Man. The e-business sector is significant. I try and sell the Isle of Man as a business centre, not a finance centre. If you were the Mars rover that took the pictures on Mars, the lens was made on the Isle of Man. The parts for the International Space Station, the Hadron Collider, made on the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
We make submarine parts, the landing gear on Boeing, some of the hydraulic that bring the gear up, made on the Isle of Man. We make ejector seats for the American Air Force, if you know about that. So we've gone down that. So we've tried to diversify the economy to 20, 30 different areas. Obviously, agriculture and fishing and tourism are the time-honoured ones, but they're a very small percentage now. But so instead of being just a finance sector, and maybe 20 years ago we were 60% finance, we're down to 40%.
Right. So it's spreading the risk.
And we're spreading the risk, putting more eggs in baskets. So digital and some of the health new developments of products we're looking to do on the Isle of Man. So anything that we can see an opportunity where when we can't provide thousands and thousands of jobs because we're small, but with the niche stuff, where the money is, the high value quality product, that's where we're sort of setting our
being
stall.
Niche, you can move quickly.
Yeah, back to our three legs of man sort of thing.
Right. So now that Tynwald's concluded, had a heavy week last week.
Oh, it was a nightmare.
Yeah. And
no aircon either. It's sweltering over here on the Isle of Man. I mean, you might be used to it in America, but trust me, we're not over here.
It's unseasonably warm, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the election's about 8 weeks away. And tell us about the workings of government in that sort of interregnum between Tynwald being dissolved.
Further,
there you go.
It's business as usual. I remain. I'm not standing again. I'd always said that I was. When I discussed about standing with my family, it's a family thing. And I said at the start of this interview, I don't consider myself to be a politician. If the people of the Isle of Man wanted me, I would do 2 terms. That's 10 years.
Yeah.
I've been president of the Farmers Union for 5 years before that. Agricultural politics 5 years before that. So 20 years of my life. I think you're gonna have the support of your family. So I'm not standing again, but I will remain. The election's on the 23rd of September, but I won't be replaced. There's an election, I think, on the 14th of October for a new chief minister. So until then, I carry on as chief minister. My council of ministers carries on. So it's business as usual, really. We can't make major changes if we needed to on certain policy without Tynwald approval. But for the next couple of months, we will carry on running the island. And if something major happened, then we do have the powers to invoke emergency powers to make change. I don't want to do that. Hopefully I don't have to do that. So we carry on, council of ministers meeting regular basis and business as usual, really.
Okay. And what advice would you give to your successor, whoever that may be?
To be true to yourself.
Right.
To do what you think is right. At the start of every year in my diary, my Tynwald diary, I write quantum inni fuit, which is a Latin phrase I learned at school. Is I did the best I could. Okay. And at the end of the day, you've got to do the best you can for the people of the island. You'll never get it right all the time, but if you work with others, try and get a team together. So I think I've got a good team. They might not be all rocket scientists, but their heart's in the right place, and they work together well as a team. That hasn't always happened in the past. And sometimes if you've got a good team working together, you achieve more.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
That one right. And what would you see as the biggest challenges for the administration as a whole?
Well, everyone will go on about, I don't know, potholes and speeding traffic and stuff when you're on the doorstep. But the biggest challenges facing the island happen off the island. So beneficial ownership, public registers, taxation, and obviously Brexit will be opportunities. The free trade agreements that are being currently negotiated. There's attacks all the time. The Isle of Man is one of the best regulated jurisdictions in the world, and that's not me saying that. That's the OECD. We've been through 2 rounds of tax transparency, and we've been fully compliant each round. And there's only 7 countries in the world that have achieved that. But everyone likes to bash the Isle of Man. Oh, it's a tax haven in the middle of the Irish Sea, blah blah blah. We're tax efficient because we have no debt. I have to run an economy where I can't go out and borrow a few billion to balance the books. So as a result, we're not spending 15-20% of our economy just serving the interest charges on debt, and we can charge a lower rate. But there's always attacks and changes around the world, and you've got to be fleet of foot and be aware of that and work with it to make sure that the island is seen as a compliant, well-regulated, after quality business on the island. These attacks happen off the island. I spend an awful lot of time in Westminster, British Irish Council, putting the message over from the island.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about, well, the European Union, we have minimal benefits, but we get particularly all the financial regulation has to be embraced here.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
we're fully compliant. We have zero, at the moment we have zero corporation tax, but businesses employ people on the island. We don't want brass plaques on the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
It's quite ironic, if you look at the 3 Crown dependencies, Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man put together, I think we've got less than 100,000 companies. I think the UK has got 3-point-something million, and I think one of our colleagues from the state of Delaware, they've got over 1 million companies, and they've got more companies than people. And it's a bit like sheep in the
New Zealand.
Falkland Islands to people.
Yeah. So we've talked about your successor in the next administration. What does the future hold for you, Chief Minister?
Right, well, I'm still only a youngster. I'm only 54, so I think I'm going to depressurize for a few months, and I'd like to have a bit of a holiday with my wife. We haven't really had a holiday in 5 years, if we're honest. I think I did a 2-week cruise at the start because I'd already booked it because I didn't know I was going to get re-elected. So we're going to do a little bit of traveling. I'll be bored out of my mind doing nothing, so we're going to. None of the kids want any of the businesses, so we're going to sell a couple of businesses, maybe buy a business, and I might do some, start a new business. Who knows? But it's up in the air. So it's a leap of faith.
Well, it seems like there's an opportunity for Howard Quayle branded. Who knows what?
Well, I'll find something to do. Politics, as I've said, I'm not a politician. I'm just a Manxman who's tried to do his best, and I move on with that. I'm in the fortunate position that before I was elected, I've been quite successful, so I can do a number of things.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't know whether there are any further questions. If you've got 5 minutes or so, we'll just perhaps see if anybody's going to add a supplementary question. Can you? Have you got any, Bill Cassidy?
I was going to say, if anyone wants to ask a question, if they could raise their hand, we can then, unmute you or ask you to unmute. We'll try and keep that orderly.
Very content.
We have a Kathy. You can unmute yourself. Let me see if I can help you.
Okay, I think I have it.
There we go. So where are you from, Kathy? To remind me?
I'm from Delaware.
You're Delaware.
So that tax haven, yes, and I'm not sure that's a good thing. But I would just make a suggestion that one of your businesses could be a bed and breakfast that other Manxmen from away from the Isle of Man could come and stay. Don't know if your family has been doing that or not, but
well, actually, I have a courtyard of 13 houses at my second farm at St. Mark's called Ballahowan, and we do that. But I think we're getting to the age now where we're probably getting too old, and you're tired to do that. So I think my wife and myself are going to rent them out as permanent. But we have done that. We've met fantastic people from all over the world, and that come back every year and stay with us. There's the Irish that come over for TT. They bring the Irish bread, which is like the fruit loaf, and Christmas cards. So you meet some lovely, lovely people. We've had old people from America, all over the world stay with us.
Well, my family and I visited several years ago, and are very anxious to come back.
Yeah,
So.
It is special. I mean, I've been to America myself, a beautiful country, but I suppose I'm biased that I genuinely believe this island is a gem of God's earth.
Yeah, I think you have to experience somewhere else. I lived in the UK for 10 years nearly, and I don't think I appreciated the Isle of Man until I left and lived somewhere else.
Yeah, I used to work for the NFU Mutual and Avon Insurance Group, and my head office was in Chester, and then I'd travel over to Stratford-upon-Avon, where the headquarters were. And I like to go away to London to see the latest opera or catch a show. I love art, so the National Gallery is fantastic to watch. But my son's just finished 4 years at university at John Moores in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Now, I thought he'd want to travel the world and couldn't wait to get off the island. And those 4 years, he's realised just what a special place the island is, and he's come back as a software engineer to work on the island where we've got a desperate need for them. So I think, sometimes you need to go away. And our young people do travel the world, and they learn skills which hopefully we'll get some of them back and bring that skills to the island to help us move forward.
Yeah. So any more questions? Penny Midlock, unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah. Hi, very nice to meet you, Mr. Quayle.
Hi,
Thank you for talking to us. Tell me, I know the film industry was quite big on the Isle of Man at one time. Is that still happening, or will it happen again after COVID?
We have a small industry now. It was major, but back, I think I mentioned at the start of this interview, back in 2008, we had a VAT renegotiation with the UK government. And there was you could say there was a loophole there. And as a result of that, some of the expenses from the film industry weren't allowed to be claimed on the island.
Yeah.
And our profitability was taken away from us. Ireland took a chunk of it, and the UK funny enough, took a chunk of it. We had some fantastic films made on the island. I think the most famous was Waking Ned, which was a beautiful story.
I think that was shown at a NAMA convention in about 2004 by
really
Isle of Man Film. Yeah.
In fact, the Irish Tourist Board tried to make out it was an
Absolutely.
island off the coast of Ireland. But no, sadly, we don't have a big tourism, a big film sector on the island anymore. We still have small films, the odd film, but nothing major. Those days ended with this VAT renegotiation with the UK government.
Thank you.
Right, and Kelly McCarthy, I think we'll make this the last one, if that's all right.
Okay, it was just about the movie. Do we still own part of Pinewood?
No, we bought shares in Pinewood with another group, but that group wanted to sell it on.
Yeah.
And we were a minority shareholder, so we sold. We made a fortune out of that, of those shares. Actually, they did a good return on capital. I'd looked at when we bought the shares. I looked at the valuation of Pinewood, and they had a load of land that had the potential to be zoned for development, and some of it was zoned. And as a result, when we sold our shares, we made a substantial gain on that. But so no, sadly we don't, because I know one of the ministers, I've just taken over as Minister for the Department for Enterprise, because that minister is now the president of Timble. So I'm running to
Skelly,
Mr. Skelly,
past as president of the North American Manx, so that known to most of the people on the screen.
And that minister would have been invited off to Pinewood for some of the receptions, and so I've missed out on that.
Right. Well, perhaps one more. Go on, Kelly.
Do you speak any Manx?
Other than basic phrases to say, Moramai and Fastamai, I'm afraid I don't. I was sent off to boarding school, and in my generation, Manx wasn't. It was frowned upon. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
Now, I'm delighted to say I met with the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, and I presented him with a photograph of De La Vera, the Irish.
Former president
at the time, and he came to the island in 1947, and he sent over a year or two later a recording bus that recorded the Manx language, the last of the Manx speakers, Ned, from Craig Nishik, Ned Madrell, etc. And that helped rejuvenate the Manx. So we've got the Bun School Ramsey, Bun School St. John's. It's really come back, and I'm really proud of that. But to my shame, I am not fluent. I can't speak a word other than Moramai Fastamai, what I always try and do when I'm doing speeches everywhere I go. Well,
the North American Manx have some awards for young people who do a lot for Manx culture. That was the presentation in the Barul Suite the other week. And I was there giving the prizes along with Mr. Skelly. It was very interesting to note that some of the people who'd embraced the Manx language had names where they obviously came from Eastern Europe. So certainly when I was at school, I don't think we even learned the words of Ellen Vannin, and certainly no Manx language. But I think now it is on the increase.
And it's significantly increased. My only claim to fame for those listening from Cleveland and Ohio is that 30 years ago, I was in for the gold medal for the Cleveland test. I didn't win it as a tenor, but I was in it. So that's about my
Yeah.
relationship with
So
Cleveland.
singing and Howard Quayle branded goods is the future.
Dave,
I don't think I'll be able to retire off that somehow, David.
Go on.
David, say one more thing. Oh, I don't know what. Mim, hold up your award again. We have a North American Manx Association Youth Award winner. Back
Oh,
when you were
right.
doing the Paul Vash, a marble, for the Perspex. There she is.
So that's you're a relative of yours, isn't it, Kelly?
Yeah, that's my daughter.
Well, as I said, I live at Ballavitchel, which
Yeah.
is the home of the Kellys.
Yeah.
That's where you came from. There's a book called "'Twas Thus and Thus They Lived," a Manx book about the history of the Kellys, and photographs of Ballavitchel Farm, where I live, is your home.
Right. So I think we've the cleaning staff are trying to sweep up around us here. So we'll bring the meeting to a close if you don't mind, Bill Cassidy. And on behalf of the North American Manx, I thank you, Chief Minister, for your time and wish you success in the future. And perhaps our paths will cross again. Well, we've got lots of people coming for the convention in 2024.
Right.
So maybe there's 13 holiday cottages that we can block book.
Well, it's great to speak to all my Manx cousins around the
Yeah.
world. Look after yourselves, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you on the island sometime in the future.
Go to my customer.
That's
Thank
the man.
you. Okay. I'm going to close my end down now.